Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Greenham Trust Community Forum for June. It seems amazing we've got to June already. And of course, thank you very much for joining us on what is the hottest day of the year. I think we've got to about 80 odd people registered. We just ticked up to 56, I see at the bottom of my screen, so I thought we'd get going. So we're delighted to have you on board. And today's topic is matched funding, or all about maximising matched funding, which clearly is one of the most important things or tools that we've seen in terms of how people have helped their own fundraising campaigns. So I thought it was well worthwhile. We've covered it a number of times before in other forums, but never really sort of focused on it in its entirety, really. So we've got a great group of speakers this morning. There were 6 from the Greenham Trust and the Good Exchange home team. We're also delighted to say a big thank you for 2 guest speakers this morning. We've got Paul Monger from Newbury Cricket Club, who's going to give us his take on a major grant study, because he's been involved in that recently with match funding. And also we've got Herman as well from All Yours Period Boxes CIC, who's going to talk about the Trust Top-Up case study as well. So look forward to hearing from Caroline a bit later on as well. So if you want to ask a question during this morning, then the slide's going up on the screen now. You should all be able to see that. You can click on the Q&A button, which is smack bang in the center of the screen, at the bottom of your screen. Type the question in the box that pops up and then click send. It'll then be seen by the panel, and we will endeavour, someone on the panel will endeavour to answer that during the course of this morning, but also we'll try and readdress those questions at the end, assuming we don't have too many. So at the end, we'll get those sort of live questions as well. We've got a 5 minutes set for a Q&A right at the end of this morning's session, which is an hour long. So we'll sort of cover any questions we haven't answered during the flow of the actual morning. So I thought we'd get straight into it this morning. And first up for us this morning is Jill Owen, who's Grants Manager with Greenham's Trust. And she's going to talk about matched funding on major grants, which is a big part of what the Trust does, of course. So Jill, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Right, good morning, everybody. Greenham Trust offer major grants for capital projects which require more than £30,000 in funding. Funding is awarded on a match funding basis of £1 for £1, and we will match donations and grants from individuals, corporates, local authorities, other charitable trusts and fundraising activities. And that's on major grants, and that will differ from Trust Top-Up, which Louise will tell you about later. We don't match your own funds or funds raised prior to the application or sponsorship payments where a donor is receiving a significant benefit in return for their donation. If you'd like to apply, all you need to do is create an application on the Good Exchange, https://thegoodexchange.com. We constantly review applications within our area of operation, so you don't have to contact us and say it's there, please consider it. We will look at it, but there again, if you want to email us, you're welcome to do so. Eligible applications are considered quarterly by our trustees at their board meetings. And when considering the size of the grant, we take into consideration a number of factors, such as the percentage of community use, the percentage of beneficiaries in our area, funds already raised, funds we have available. Typical grant offers are 25 to 50% of the balance, up to say about £100,000. What we look for in our applications, but it's not exclusively, is good community use, beneficiaries from our area of operation, which is West Berkshire and the neighbouring wards of North Hampshire, a fundraising plan, tell us how you propose to raise the balance, evidence of defined need, sustainability of the project, and collaboration with other charitable organisations. If your application is successful, you'll receive a match funding offer via the Good Exchange with terms and conditions which we ask you to read and sign. Once your offer has been confirmed, donations will automatically be matched via the platform, and grants from other organisations and charities which we decide to match will be matched manually by ourselves. So sometimes there's a short delay between those grants going on and us picking it up and matching it. Thank you. So payment terms, we often get asked about the payment terms. So the payment of any donations or grants from people other than Greenham Trust made through the platform will be made to you by the 14th of the month following the month of the donation. So if, for example, you get a donation in the middle of June, you would receive that donation by the 14th of July. Payment of the Greenham Trust match funding, though, isn't made straight away. What we do is we accrue all that match funding for you, and then when you get in touch with us and tell us that you've raised all the funding you need for the project to go ahead, and you've got a signed contract and work is about to take place, then we'll agree a payment schedule with you. And depending on the size of your project, very often this will be on a monthly basis or on pro rata as work progresses on site. We will, however, work with you to make sure that you don't have any sort of cash flow issues and that funding is paid promptly. So I hope that covers it for you. But if you do have any questions, please ask via this webinar, or you can always get in touch with us through grantinquiries@greenhamtrust.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, for that very clear explanation of major grants, which clearly form a big part of what the Trust does, across our area of operation in West Berkshire and North Hampshire. Now, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker, who's Paul Monger from Newbury Cricket Club, who've been a recipient of a major grant. So Paul would like to share his own personal experiences of match funding through that process. Paul, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Firstly, this is our first major funding round through the Greenham Trust and Good Exchange. But I actually went onto the website. It's actually our 7th time that we've actually used Greenham Trust and Good Exchange to raise money for various projects. The others been a lot smaller than this. But just a quick background to our project. We wanted to ideally to knock our pavilion down. Anybody who's been in North Croft Park will agree with me. It's a bit of an eyesore. But the funding for that nowadays is in the region of £500,000 to £600,000, and probably north of that. And it wasn't realistic that we would raise that amount of funds. So we came up with an alternative plan to redevelop the clubhouse, make the foundation safer. And we got to a project cost of about £200,000 that way. And what we've also done is we've partnered up with a yet to be named local charity, although there's a press release very soon coming out on that one, who are going to use our redeveloped clubhouse for their base for their services from now on. What we did is we put together a definitive project using some fairly detailed quotes and estimates from local building contractors. And I think it's important that you have a realistic plan. We never thought that we would raise the amount of money we raised. So what we did is we broke our plan down into phases. So we had 4 phases to our plan, which meant that we could still redevelop the clubhouse even if we didn't hit the overall amount of funding that we were looking to hit. Because let's say we got to 70 or 80,000 of the 200,000, we could still do enough to the clubhouse to be able to redevelop it to the standard that we needed it to, and for the local charity to come in and be able to use it. If we're honest, phases 2, 3 and 4 were always going to be the icing on the cake. And I'm delighted to say, we're going to be putting that icing on the cake shortly. But I think the other thing is you have to understand when you're setting up a project like this is who's going to benefit from it. So I think we were pretty clear all along. We're a community cricket club. We want to partner up with local organisations on a not-for-profit basis to be able to use our facilities. And we've always been like that. And we've always been open to offers from the local community. So not only do our junior club members benefit and their families, our senior club member benefits, but we can now use a redeveloped clubhouse to host activities for local organisations, which we'd be more than happy to do. We've got a fantastic green space right in the middle of town. We just got a bit of an eyesore and a horrible building to go with it. So when it does get redeveloped, it means that a lot more people are going to be able to use it. And clearly, local charity that are coming in that you will all be aware about in a few weeks' time are going to be able to use it for their users as well. So I think that's clear. You have your definitive plan, you know who benefits, and you make sure you get the background right for me. In terms of the match funding, that's been the key thing for us. Okay, so we were offered from Greenham Trust 50,000 match funding if we could get it together. We didn't know how we were going to get it together, but we gladly accepted it at the time. And I'm happy to say that we're now past that. And in fact, any donations we get now, it almost is a bit disappointing because they don't get match funding because we've reached our 50,000 target. But that 50,000 was absolutely key. Plus the gift aid as well. So, we quickly went to anybody that we were asking for money, certainly individuals saying, well, if you give us £1, that turns into £2.25 or whatever it is, you know, because of the power of the match funding and the gift aid. And that was absolutely key for us. I hope Chris doesn't mind me saying this, but we also, because it was such a big project, we did engage Greenham Trust a long time in the few years before we set the project up. We actually met with Chris a couple of times to explain our project to him and to kind of and to get his buy-in for when the trustee meetings were going to happen. So what I don't want, Chris, is for you to have loads of contact and loads of meetings or whatever, but certainly that worked for us because we were able to kind of fill in the gaps. Because the online grant application or the online application is great, but it's a kind of bit black and white, and you want to kind of explain the grey areas sometimes, and you don't always get the time and space to do that on the application. In terms of engagement, that was critical for us because the plan was in place, the match funding offer was in place, but it's kind of how do we get there? So I think we were quite creative. We set up a creative bid because what we really wanted to do was to get into the double match funding day. But unfortunately, we didn't quite get through on the criteria of that. But we decided to still go ahead. We put together a fairly creative project. We launched the Good Exchange bid really well and the match funding really well. We, instead of just doing written communications, we actually got our whole committee to be part of a video, and we launched it on all our social media channels, and we put it onto the Good Exchange website as well, so everybody could see exactly how the club was going to benefit. We engaged our membership and family and friends. And what I would say to other organisations out there, if you have juniors involved in your organisation, they are like gold dust when it comes to raising money, okay? Because of their network of friends, aunties, uncles, grandparents. We found that they were absolute, so important to us in terms of how we raise the funds. Communication is key. We over-communicate at Newbury Cricket Club, and people probably get bored of our Twitter feeds and our Facebook pages and our Instagram feeds. But the key point for us is we don't want anyone to think that the project's stalled or it's not happening. So we were doing daily, twice daily, sometimes 3 times daily updates on how the project was going, just to make sure that everybody who knows about Newbury Cricket Club and our project knew exactly what was happening. Okay, and after as well, you know, after we've been a success, we've made sure we've continued that communication. And don't be afraid to use the press. I've always found Newbury Today, Newbury Weekly News, really happy to communicate anything that benefits a local organisation. And at the end of the day, if your organisation is like ours, which is not for profit and run by volunteers, stuff like that really helps. People will find out about you that you don't know these people. They will find out about you. And in fact, if we look at some of the major grants that we got or the major donations that we got through our project, a lot of these were people that we had no awareness of before. And it's absolutely critical that you get the message out there far and wide, because otherwise how will these people find out about your project and be willing to donate for it as well? So the other thing is, I'd say use all the communication channels available, not just the press, emails, as many people as you can, and social media nowadays is a really good way of kind of getting a message across. We also highlighted 150 local organisations that we thought might like to know about our project, and we found out their contact details, and we contacted all those, and we were successful with some of those as well. And one of my kind of key points is, don't be afraid to ask. Okay, if you are a non-for-profit volunteer-run organisation, people aren't necessarily going to come up and offer you things. You've got to go out there and tell them why you're raising money, who it's going to benefit. And a lot of people saw the match funding for us. I go back to match funding again. A lot of people saw the match funding as a more effective way of donating than if the match funding hadn't been. I think it's really, really key. They can really see their money turning into something else. And one thing that our club chairman always said to me, and I never believed him until about 6 months ago, he always said to me that if you get the ball rolling and people will start to donate, it will attract other donations. And I always said, well, don't be so stupid, you can't rely on that. But it's absolutely true. Once we started to raise money, more money came in, and it snowballed, and we were getting more and more money off the back of it. The other thing about the Good Exchange that I hadn't considered as well on the Good Exchange website is they actually go and find donors for you that you have no idea who they are or where they are or what they are. And we've had quite a few £1,000s through donors that the Good Exchange have identified on our behalf. So all in all, it's been a massive success. It's a real building site now, because we've actually started the work and we hope to finish in November. But we could have never have done this without the match funding from Greenham Trust, and we could never have done it without the Good Exchange. So, you know, I hope that if there's organisations out there that are considering major projects, that they kind of listen to some of the stuff I've said, because it's, as I say, it's been kind of gold dust for us.
Paul, thank you. Some real key pointers there, and I think it does emphasise the importance of match funding and how you can use it as a tool to drive the giving, can't you? And you clearly have done that. You know, as you say, you've used all these channels. You know, you haven't been afraid to ask. Your reach was interesting, wasn't it? You say you lots of people donate you didn't even know as an organisation. So it's amazing, isn't it, how you can reach those organisations. And of course, you know, obviously through what we do as a trust, and Julian May, one of our colleagues online this morning, you know, Julian's involved in the collaborative funding. So we're always on the lookout to help organisations like yours to get other funders to engage as well. So really good. And also fantastic to hear that you've collaborated with another local charity. I won't speculate as to who that might be, but it's great. So it's obviously some sort of shared shared occupation of that, which is great. Yeah,
and that really benefits us, because the cricket club gets a bit cold and damp during the winter, and it doesn't get used during the week, and it improves the security of it, and it gives the charity a base from which to operate its service from. You know, so everyone's a winner. It really is beneficial.
Yeah. Because going back to the meeting, and I think it was important you made that point, actually. I think what I'd say is, and I don't mind you at all mentioning meeting, because it is important, because, you know, we just need to understand as the trust team, you know, more about these applications, particularly the large capital ones, but also the sort of project-based ones, or even those that are linked to core funding. You know, our focus at the trust is very much building a relationship up with the organisations we support. And, you know, we've been far more effective by doing that. We get to know people who said, you know, you've used us, 7 times, you say, before, but we probably hadn't connected until this very big one. And I think it's fair to say all members of the team, particularly Louis, James and Jill Owen, are more than happy to talk on the phone and meet if needs be to run through it. But obviously, I'm available as well. It's my job to be available to talk to people. And that's what I find exciting, actually. And, you know, I often say to people, it's not just about the money. You know, what I want to understand is more about the projects. And that's why it's great to hear there's a collaboration here, you know, at Newbury Cricket Club with another charity as well. So it's good to hear the background to them and see what we can do to help and give you some pointers. So thank you. A great talk there, Paul. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to the other end of the scale, which is trust top-up. And I think, as many of you will know, eligible applications on the Good Exchange get up to £5,000 of matched funding. And you know, but it's an actual tool that often isn't used by many, actually, or certainly not maximised by many. So we've got a case study coming up in a minute, but firstly, it's Louise James, Head of Grants at the Trust, to talk about Trust Top-Up.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. I just wanted to quickly point to one question that came in for Paul before I start, which was, how many were involved in your team to put the whole project together for the cricket club?
So pretty much the whole committee. So we divided the roles up between the committee, and, you know, somebody was on communication, somebody was project manager, somebody was contacting local organisations, but all 12 of the committee were involved in one way or another, and also some of the membership as well. We you know, we're not afraid to ask our members to kind of do some work for us when we need to. So it's a real team effort, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Thank you, Paul. So Trust Top-Up is our promise to match for pound donations made to your projects, particularly donations from public and corporate donations and from fundraising collections. So we don't, unlike match funding, we do not offer matched funding for grants made to your projects. This is specifically to try and unlock public support and gain some traction and momentum for your work when your project goes live. So many are familiar on this call with Trust Top-Up, but there are some newbies. And anyway, it might be helpful to refresh your knowledge. But what we do is we offer up to £10,000 per year per charitable organisation, with up to £5,000 per project. So it's a generous offer, and it's fairly straightforward. To get access to Trust Top-Up match funding, you must have a live project on the Good Exchange, and have beneficiaries in our funding areas, which are West Berkshire and North Hampshire. Now, we do obviously do some diligence to then offer that match funding. So we make sure that your reporting is up to date on any previous funding we've given. We make sure that the project that you're putting forward is feasible, And there is some, like with major grants, there is some paperwork to complete, some terms and conditions to sign, because the terms and conditions commit you to spending the money that you raise through Trust Top Up, which effectively becomes a grant payment on the project that you've outlined. So at the moment, we are offering Trust Top Up for a 6-month window at the beginning of your project. And really that is designed to boost your early fundraising. We changed that in October last year because it had been for a year window. And we just found that that didn't necessarily get used. And what we really wanted to do was give the emphasis to really boost your early fundraising. It also enables us to support different projects over time because Trust Top Up is a rolling programme, and we assess it at the office level and offer it at office level. It doesn't need to go to the board. We give the trustees quarterly reports on the funding distributed, but the actual approval process is a rolling one at office level. So again, income onto your project, which is eligible for Trust Top Up matching, are gifts made by public members of the public through individual donations, whether that's via backs, whether that's a credit card donation or a debit card donation. We don't match the gift aid element, but we can collect gift aid on their behalf if they're eligible and complete the online form to declare their gift aid eligible. Also corporate donations. So it's an opportunity to engage local companies in what you're trying to do in your project and your work. Company donations can be matched. And also fundraising collections. So at the moment, and in fact, there was a question came in from Judith Colby about this because at the Lions, because face-to-face fundraising and bucket collections have been hampered a lot by the last year and a half of lockdowns and restrictions. But there are opportunities still to raise funds from the public in permissible ways. So whether it's on market day, whether it's having something outside if you're lucky enough to have a base for your charity, you can still appeal for cash donations, and they, once collected, they can be put onto your project for matching. If you could move to the next slide, please, Marina. I wanted to give you an example. Mike McKenzie, I think, is due to be on this call today. So St George's have used Trust Top Up for lots of their projects over the years. Here's a recent example. You can see that on the Good Exchange, they've got a project trying to raise £1,646, and that the Greenham Trust has offered 823, which, if you look at it, is 50% of that total target, which obviously means that if they wanted to raise 3,000, we would offer 1,500, and so on. That's because this organisation has 100% beneficiaries in our area. Where we have organisations that perhaps are based, say, in Reading and support some residents of West Berkshire with their work, we will give a proportional amount of Trust Top Up. And I think Andrew Simpson Foundation, you're on the call today, that's an example. So we'll give a proportional offer, recognising that some of the beneficiaries are in our area, but not all of them. So St George's have been offered 823. They've already managed to raise nearly £500 of donations to use up that matching, and they're well on their way. So that's a great example of sort of a normal looking Trust Top Up offer that we might have on a platform at any time. So a few insights into our sort of headline figures. Actually, we're really proud of Trust Top Up. £1.6 million has been distributed through Trust Top Up over the last 5 years to over 750 different local community projects. And what is even more important than the headline figure is that is money that has been matched from public and corporate donations. So the whole community is getting behind your work, and we're helping facilitate that through this match giving. But we really, really want everyone to take it up. We're at the point now where about 80% of our projects are accepting the offer, but still just under 60% of funds offered are being used up. We do know that there's a real mix of project type. People will have different networks of support out there, So perhaps 100% is never going to be achieved, but we're going to try and get there. So when you get your Trust Top Up offer, please do accept it. Have a think through what you might do, a bit like Paul was saying about major giving. Come up with a plan. How are we going to raise that £5,000 and use every penny that is being offered here? And I think that is where I hand back to Chris to introduce Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. So that was clearly a very useful background there to Trust Top Up and the tool that it is, and you know, how it can be used. But we thought we'd bring it to life really with our next guest speaker. So is Caroline Herman from All Yours Period Boxes. So Caroline is going to give us her own view on how she's used Trust Top Up.
Thank you, Chris. So All Yours is a relatively new entity. We created the project in December 2020. It was me and my 14-year-old daughter. We decided that we wanted to help try and tackle period poverty in West Berkshire, and we started raising money. The project, we make two types of boxes. We have teen boxes and adult boxes, so they're products specifically designed for younger girls and older women. And we also offer reusable products like reusable pads and menstrual cups. So far, the project has distributed over 2,000 boxes. We actually sent out our 2,300th box yesterday. And that means that we've helped almost 3,000 women, because some of those boxes are actually family boxes, so they cater for more than just one individual. We started in West Berkshire, but as kind of awareness and momentum behind the project has grown, we now cover, through a network of 14 volunteers, we cover West Berkshire, Reading, South Oxfordshire, Basingstoke and Swindon. So our main core work at the moment is providing the period boxes, but we also have run a project through the Good Exchange to raise money to buy knickers and tights for every secondary school in West Berkshire. And through the Good Exchange and the Greenham Trust match funding, which I'll talk about in a minute, we have actually completed that part of the project. We're solely reliant at the moment on grants and public donations. So we're looking at how we can make the projects kind of more self-sustainable. We are actually registered as a community interest company. So we're looking in the future as how we can sustain ourselves. But at the moment, the Good Exchange and obviously the Greenham Trust Top Up is kind of a vital component of our project. So if I talk a little bit about our Good Exchange project, so we put together the numbers behind what we needed to raise to fund a further 1,000 generic boxes, and we also wanted to do another 750 bespoke family boxes. We also worked out how much it would cost us to raise 10 pairs of knickers and 10 pairs of tights and 2 hot water bottles across every secondary school in West Berkshire, and there's 10 of those. So that led us to working out that we needed to raise just over £16,000, and this was kind of to see us over the next 6 to 12 months. We've currently raised just over £8,000, so we're really kind of trucking through it now, which is great. We set the project up on the Good Exchange in March, and by April we had attracted the attention of the Greenham Trust, which is fantastic. And our top-up trust top-up funding now runs until October, or until we reach the magic £5,000 mark. So in terms of receiving the Greenham Trust top-up, if we can just go to the next slide, it's given us some real key elements to kind of hang the project off. So firstly, it's given us visibility. So being listed on the Good Exchange and being selected for match funding has drawn attention, in much as Paul talked about. It's given us attention that we probably wouldn't have received otherwise. And we actually secured a big donor because we were listed on the Good Exchange and had been selected for the trust top up. And although we can't match fund what they've given us because they are a charitable organisation themselves, a charity called Children First International actually gave us £2,500, which meant that we could complete the secondary school project of knickers and tights much earlier than we had anticipated. So although, as I say, we didn't benefit from match funding, we benefited from Greenham Trust kind of putting their faith in our project. So that's just invaluable to us. And to go with the visibility, it's also given us credibility. Obviously, Louise talks about the due diligence they do and looking at projects. And I think that is a big tick. People see us listed as recipients of the Trust Top Up. And I think they realise that we've been through that process and that we're kind of a credible project to support. We've also used the fact that we received the Trust Top Up when we go out in our communications with local companies. And we have actually had donations in through companies who've been swayed by the idea that their money can be doubled. And that, as I said, has given us that credibility that we wouldn't necessarily have had. We've also benefited from having, kind of a PR hook to talk about. We've been featured in the Newbury Weekly News twice, and we've talked about the Trust Top Up there. And we've also been on Radio Berkshire 5 times now. The latest was just last week. We did a 25-minute in-depth interview about the project on there. And again, it's a brilliant to be able to talk about the support that we're getting from the Good Exchange and the Greenham Trust. It's also fantastic to use on our social media, which is where we do a lot of our awareness raising. We can promote our work on there, and it's fantastic to be able to sell to people that if they donate to us through the Good Exchange, their money will be doubled. And for them, that's like a fantastic selling point and a good hook. And then lastly, I think it's really important to talk about the support that we get from the Good Exchange and from the Greenham Trust team. They help us amplify our message, especially on social media. They're helping us raise awareness of our project. And when people have trouble with donations or, kind of getting into their accounts on the Good Exchange, they've been there all the way through for us to make sure that we're not losing donations because people have given up because they can't log in or they can't get their payment to go through. So having that team of support there is proving invaluable to us. And a bit like Paul said, people have kind of come to us through the Good Exchange and through the project that we're running with the Greenham Trust Top Up. And we've learned to just not say no to anyone. They might offer us support, they might offer us money, they might offer us practical help. And it's just been a fantastic opportunity for us to kind of meet people that we just wouldn't have come across if we'd just been doing this by ourselves. So a big thank you from us to all our donors, but also to the team behind us as well. Thank you.
Caroline, thank you very much for that very interesting insight into what you've achieved. I mean, from a standing start back in December 2000 to have supported 3,000 women, you said, with 2,300 boxes, your 2,300 box meditators today. Amazing, isn't it, that you've grown so quickly? And it's also interesting, I thought, as well, to say that the mere listing of you on the Good Exchange and acceptance for Trust Top Up as match funding has really helped boost your ability to raise money.
It was amazing. We didn't have that expectation at all, and so it's just been fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear actually that's worked for you as well. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. Joining us this morning and running us through that. So that's Trust Top Up. We've covered the detail. We've covered the case study on Trust Top Up, which I hope everybody will find interesting. As I say, it's often much underused as a tool, really. So it's important that organisers really do get the benefit of that, and that's why I think it was excellent to have Caroline and Herman there just talking about our own personal experiences of that. We're going to move on now to something slightly different, and the match funding in the overall sense. And we've got our head of marketing, Marina Stedman, who's going to talk on how match funding works on the Good Exchange platform. Marina.
Morning, everyone. So I know some of you are overly familiar with match funding, but I thought if there's anyone new, I'm just going to quickly cover how match funding works on the Good Exchange, and also compare that to two other very well-known match funding schemes, which are the Big Give and Crowdfunder, because we do get questions in from organisations using the Good Exchange about the difference and confusion. I wouldn't say I was an expert on the Big Give and Crowdfunder, but hopefully I've got a simple overview. So match funding on the Good Exchange is based on a funder such as Greenham Trust offering a match funding grant. So in my example here, you can see Funder A has offered the charitable project a £5,000 grant, and that match funding offer is £1 for £1. So as Caroline and Paul have said, that offer incentivises donors and fundraisers and organisations to give money, because every pound that they donate or raise becomes £2. So in my example, the funder's offering 5,000, public donations and fundraising appeals bring money in, and sometimes Julian, for example, will work with the charitable organisation and maybe get some other funding from another funder, and that will be matched as well. And in the end, the organisation fundraising has to raise £5,000, but they will have £10,000 raised towards their charitable project. So what match funding is doing is really doubling the amount of money that your organisation has to spend on its charitable project. So from a Greenham Trust point of view, it's typically paid out on a £1 for £1 basis, unless it's a double match day, which we're doing this weekend. And I think one of the main differences between the way that Greenham Trust match funding works and Crowdfunder and the Big Give works is the money is paid out pound for pound, and there's no criteria on you've got to raise all the money or a certain percentage of the money. It's just £1. If your product just raises £1, you'll get £1 from Greenham Trust. So as Louise said, obviously that is actually paid to you based on standard payment schedules, but you've got no risk that the money you've raised to be matched won't be matched. Now, comparing that to the Big Give, I guess many of you have heard of the Big Give's Christmas Challenge. So this is where fundraising charities put fundraising projects onto the Big Give platform, and the Big Give has something called champions, who are partners like funding organisations who give money to charitable organisations funding through the Big Give. And then charitable organisations also have something called pledges, and pledges have to agree in advance to match the match funding of the champions or give the match funding themselves. And then it sounds very complicated, but I'll explain it a bit further. And then, so the charitable organisations, in a way, in the Big Give, have to find their own match funding from what's called pledges. So the funders don't find it for them. They have to find it in advance. And then during Big Give week, they then have to find more donors and fundraisers who match the pledges. So if you think about, so in a simple way, who provides the match funding money? So the match funds or the pledges are provided by the fundraising charities. So the difference between, say, the Greenham Trust and the Good Exchange, through the Good Exchange, the match funding is provided by Greenham Trust in this example. So the fundraising charities don't have to find it. If you're using the Big Give, you have to find your match funding before Big Give week, and then during Big Give week you then have to find a load of donors and fundraisers to match the match funding that you've already found before. So, and then how that works during Big Give week, which is at the beginning of December, is when you start getting your donations going into the jar, the first thing the Big Give does is matches it with your pledge money that you've previously found. Now, in some cases, the Big Give may give you something called champions money, which is funders, but that doesn't get matched until you've used up all the money that you previously raised from your pledges. So in this example, the fundraising charity could receive match funding of £6,000, but that would only be by matching their pledges with their fundraising. They wouldn't get this extra money from their champions until they'd matched their pledge. So it's a completely different model than the model used on the Good Exchange. And if we look at Crowdfunder, Now, I think the main difference between Crowdfunder and the Good Exchange and how Greenham Trust works is mostly you will have to hit your overall funding target to receive your match funding. So Crowdfunder calls match funding extra funding. And so the funding is not given to the charity incrementally. So if you're fundraising for £10,000 and you only raise £5,000 of that, you won't get any of the match funding that has been offered by Crowdfunder. So it's quite a risky way of fundraising if you don't achieve all the money. So I found a little example here, Tranmere Rovers. They're fundraising for a new fan park. They need to raise 350,000, but it says here this project will only be funded if at least 350,000 is pledged. If they don't meet their target, all the money that they've raised goes back to the supporters and the funders, and that project doesn't go ahead. So I know that was fast and furious through them, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that if you get match funding from Greenham Trust, it is guaranteed that every pound you raise towards that match funding target will be doubled by Greenham Trust. There, there's no ifs and buts and maybes. So as Louise said, you should definitely focus on using that match funding before you think about any of the other match funding campaigns that are available, because that money is guaranteed for you as long as you can raise money to match it, and you don't have to find any money of your own from other funders to match that money.
Thanks, Mina. No, you are right to say that match funding offer from the trust is guaranteed match funding. Unlike, as you've explained, on the other platforms, Big Give and Crowdfunder, it's very different the way they operate. So thank you very much for that. I think it's a useful overview for others of what is available elsewhere and how it operates, because it is very, very different to how the Good Exchange operates. Thanks, Marina. So next we're going to move on to Julian Mays, Head of Collaborative Funding here at the Trust. And we've already talked about this quite a bit this morning, really, and particularly from our case studies from Paul from Newbury Cricket Club and also from Caroline. So how you drive your match funding, and they've amplified how they've done that. But over to Julian for you to tell us about your views on how we should go about driving match funding.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all of the other speakers who have very eloquently explained how match funding has helped them with their fundraising projects via the Good Exchange. I think it's really important to reiterate, first of all, that as many of the speakers have already referred to, that we as a trust and as an accompanying platform are on the journey with you in your fundraising process. And that means that, yes, my job as head of collaborative funding is to form relationships with other funders and to help and persuade them to support your projects alongside Greenham Trust after the match funding has been awarded. But it's also to help you in terms of positioning your fundraising project on the Good Exchange. And to work with you to find the right partners to support you in your fundraising process. So could I have the, okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the fundraising appeals that Greenham Trust has been very successful at because of the influence of match funding on the platform, and a couple of examples of where the Trust match funding has had a big influence in terms of helping the fundraising organisations attract donations and grants. So we're all aware of the huge challenges which the coronavirus pandemic has had in terms of the effect on society and communities. But the Trust was able to mobilise very quickly other funder partners and public and company donations by offering significant sums of match funding via the Good Exchange. It helped to attract over a dozen other funder partners, which gave substantial grants and also substantial donations from individuals as well, some totaling £20,000. This enabled us to raise £500,000. The actual figure of match funding is close to 200,000. I put those figures in because that's what the Good Exchange platform is showing, but it is close to £200,000, which has raised nearly £500,000 in match funding. Thanks, Marina. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in exactly the same way, really, the coronavirus appeal has really sort of shone a light. The pandemic has shone a light in terms of highlighting inequalities in society, and one of those is unfortunately the disparity between disadvantaged families who didn't have access to technology during the lockdowns for homeschooling. So the Trust decided to launch a Laptops for Lockdown Learning appeal, and in just 6 weeks it raised £288,640, thanks to, again, a significant match funding grant from Greenham Trust, raising substantial donations, and also grants from other funders, both registered funders, but also those that operate regionally outside of Greenham's area. So, but thanks to the relationships that we've built up, we were able to support 35 schools with 1,190 laptops. If you go to the next slide, please, Marina. So we don't just run appeals through the Good Exchange, as you've already heard. We also enable funders to provide match funding for individual projects. One of them is a homelessness prevention project, where we managed to build a relationship with the Police and Crime Commissioner for the Thames Valley that wanted to award £7,500 of match funding, which in turn attracted 4 different funders, and we managed to get the project funded in a couple of months through the Good Exchange. And it's just, again, another example of how the credibility and momentum that's created through match funding, it attracts other funder grants, because just in the same way as Paul and Caroline explained, that the donation will be doubled, then a funder grant is doubled in the same way. Funders want to demonstrate impact for their money, and by match funding through the platform, they can see that their grant is doubled and effectively has doubled the impact in terms of supporting local communities. If you could go to the next slide, please. The Waterside Centre, a refurbishment of the Waterside Centre by Berkshire Youth, a youth centre in Newbury, was able to raise, again, substantial grants and donations because of the catalyst of Greenham Trust match funding through the platform, which has influenced and attracted, again, funders from registered funders and also funders from outside of the platform. And again, the message is the same. Match funding works. It's worked for 10 years. We started match funding via our pilot platform, Find Me a Grant, and have continued it throughout the Good Exchange over the last nearly 5 years. It's raised millions of pounds for local good causes. If you go to the next slide, please. It's also important when you're thinking about how match funding can help you, as Paul alluded to earlier, to approach local companies. So this example is the Rosemary appeal, which was a cancer centre and a renal dialysis unit at West Berkshire Hospital. And the Greenham Trust and the Good Exchange approached Jones Robinson on behalf of the Rosemary appeal to ask them if they would support the charity via the platform. In other words, to get their donations, their fundraising, which was then matched by the estate agent, and then the whole money was then matched via the Good Exchange. So the £20,000 that they awarded as match funding was doubled, raising £40,000 for the Rosemary appeal. But again, the catalyst was the match funding from Greenham Trust. That endorsement and that confidence that had already raised a significant amount of money, then persuaded Jones Robinson that it was a good idea to award that match funding through the platform. And so just to finish and reiterate, it's important that, yes, we're there on the journey with you, and yes, we will approach our registered funders via the Good Exchange, and also our funding partners locally, regionally and nationally to help to support you. But it's also, as we've heard from Paul and Caroline, it's important to get to work with your membership, to work with your supporters, to work with your team, to get a plan together, and to have conversations with funders and companies and say that we've demonstrated here already that match funding works through the Good Exchange, thanks to Greenham Trust and other funders. Why don't you have a go and give us that opportunity to boost our donations and our ability to attract other grants? Thanks. Julian,
thank you very much. Very, very useful insight there, and some good case studies there of the appeals and the Rosemary appeal and all that, and you know how it's worked there. So thank you for that. We're going to move on now quickly to our last section for today, but a very important one. We've got two of our team from the Good Exchange. So firstly, Helen Carlisle, Systems Lead and Technical Support Manager. She's going to talk about using the platform, the Good Exchange, to promote your fundraising, which you'll see from other discussions this morning is very important. And then last but certainly not least, Misha Wallace, who's Client Support Manager at Good Exchange, is going to give you some project tips and tools as well. So Helen, over to you first.
Thank you, Chris. If I could have the first slide, please, Marina. I'm just going to quickly talk about the actual detail that you can see on the Good Exchange platform for people who are looking to support your project. So this is an image that you've seen already this morning, but it's of the project page with the detail of the project, how much is left to raise, and any match funding that may be applied to your project. So the key things to look out for are on the right there, you've got a little match funding symbol with £1 becoming £2. If you can see that on any project on the Good Exchange that's live, it means there is match funding currently available on it. The other thing to note is that you might have we've got other funders who also offer match funding. So in this example, we've got Greenham Trust who've offered match funding and the Miss Lawrence Trust who've offered. If you have two live match funding offers, it means that £1 donated becomes £3 because you get one from each of the funders as well. Where you see, in this example, you can see that the amount remaining, £4,100, has been scored out. Now, the reason for the scoring out might be several-fold. It might be that the funding offer has expired. Louise mentioned earlier that Trust Top Up currently only runs for 6 months, so it might have expired. Or there might be other reasons why that offer is no longer valid. So please look out for that. There is a little information symbol there. We can find out more details, and it's always worth checking your terms and conditions to see what they are specifically for that offer. Now, the other thing I want to just talk quickly about is on the right there, you've got ticks under matching donations and matching grants. Again, different types of offers. Jill mentioned major grants. Major grants actually do match funding on donations, and they also match grants from other funders. So if both boxes are ticked, it means you've got matching on both. Now, grant matching doesn't happen automatically. The funder needs to look to see who's given a grant and whether or not they wish to match it. So please bear that in mind. And the information on amount remaining is really useful to share with your supporters just to keep them going, keep them engaged. Next slide, please, Marina. Now, when a donor actually makes the donation, they can see at the time, in real time, that their donation has been matched. So you can see this donor's donated £30, and during the donation process, it says your donation has been matched by Miss Lawrence Trust of £30. Don't forget to tick the gift aid box and ask your donors to share their donation plus the match funding information on social media. Next slide, please. Now, you can also pay in fundraising collections, and these will be matched. Fundraising collections can be paid in using BACS or credit card or debit card. But when you pay these in, you should tick the appropriate box. So in this example, you've got the opportunity at the bottom to say it's a collection, and you should, in the top box, say how that money was raised. If you want further information on making a donation, there's a link in this slide as to all the different ways you can make donations and how that actually works. Moving on to final slide is just something else to be aware of, that donors can now opt in when they make their donation. in order to be thanked by you as an organisation for making that donation. And you can see who has opted in by downloading an activity report from your dashboard. And this slide also shows the ability to share that donation on social media. That's really key. But please be aware that the share on WhatsApp symbol is only available when you make the donation on your mobile phone, because WhatsApp is really a mobile first application. And now I'm going to hand straight over to Misha.
Thanks, Helen. So I'm just going to quickly go through for you a bit about spreading the word about your project. So you really want to be encouraging as many donors as possible to come in and support you and really take advantage of that match funding. So the first way you can do that is to share out the unique link to your project page. And there's two ways that you can do that. So the first one is by just simply copying and pasting the link. Whilst you're on your project page, the link is at the very top. So if you copy and paste that, and you can paste it into your website, your emails, newsletters, and especially social media as well to spread the word. Now, when you share that link, do ensure first that you are logged out from your Good Exchange account. If you copy a link whilst you're logged in and share it, if someone clicks on it, it's not going to work for them. So log out from the Good Exchange first, find your project, copy the URL over into your social media posts and your website, etc. Now, Paul touched on earlier about, repeating the message on social media by sharing his project and letting people know that they still needed support. Definitely don't be afraid of repeating a message. That's a really great strategy that Paul had there. Let people know we still need your support. If you've got match funding still in place, tell them your donation will be doubled. It's a fantastic incentive for donors to know their donation will be doubled. So spread the word as much as you can in that way. And also Caroline said as well that she also shares out the link to her project page, and we can see her doing that actively as well. And she's got lovely images on the social media posts and really nice content encouraging people to support. So yeah, do continue to do that as much as you possibly can. The second way that you can share your project page is directly through onto your social media pages. So instead of copying the link to the page, you go onto your project page and you click on the share button that you can see in blue there on the slide. And from there, you can choose which social media channel to post your project on, and you've got a little selection available. And as Helen says, WhatsApp will only show on there if you're on your phone at the time. So two great ways to share. Do it as much as you possibly can and really get those donations coming in. So second of all, I just wanted to very quickly go through public fundraisers and how they can support your project. Now, public fundraisers on the Good Exchange would be a member of the public or possibly a company team who are undertaking a fundraising activity in support of a project on the Good Exchange. So if a public fundraiser wants to get involved with what you're doing, they can click Become a Fundraiser on your project page. There's a button on the left-hand side. And from there, they can set up a fundraiser profile outlining the activity they're undertaking, the event and the dates of the event, and they can share out their profile to encourage people to donate. Now, fundraisers are very powerful because they're off in the background spreading the word about what they're doing, and any donations coming through to their profile will also come through to your project. And if you have match funding in place, they'll be doubled. So it's a really great way of firing through those donations from another means and using up your match funding. And we've added a couple of links there on how to become a public fundraiser if you want to share that with any supporters you currently have, and a little case study there about a particular corporate team who supported a project on the Good Exchange that had match funding. So do have a look at those links when we send the slides over to you. Next slide, please. So also I wanted to talk about videos. So Paul touched on earlier that he used a video of his team to spread the word about their project, which is really, really good. So talking about live videos, there's two that you can do on social media. So the first one is Facebook Live. Now, these types of videos are a great way to engage your supporters in the real present time. You can let them know about your project, let them know about your match funding, and this can really help to drive donations through. So Facebook Live, You can use this on Facebook if you have an organisational Facebook page, and you can use it to broadcast live videos from that page to let people know a little bit of something about what you're doing. Now, tips for this beforehand: do a little bit of prep before you undertake the live video. So create a little description about what you're going to do. Let people know in advance that you're going to be presenting a live video on a particular date. So you could perhaps send out social media posts to let people know, come and join us on this date and we'll be presenting a live video. You can ask your viewers at the time of undertaking the video to follow you, so they'll receive notifications when you go live. That's really interesting. If you're following a particular group, it will pop up on your phone to say this organisation is now live, and you can tap in and have a little watch. So do let people know, and make sure you have a nice strong mobile phone signal or Wi-Fi signal so that it doesn't cut out, just the kind of the basics of that. And what you'll find during the video, people can make comments and they can like the video. So do have someone on standby to respond to those comments and really get engaged and chat with people. We do know that supporters and donors really enjoy that engagement. On a Facebook live video, you must broadcast for a minimum of 4 seconds, but you can do it for all the way up to 8 hours. So if you're running a great big long fundraising event, you can keep the live video going and people can get involved during that period. And we've added a little link there to let you know a bit more about that. Don't be afraid of live videos. Have a little watch, have a little play with it and see if it suits you, but it is a good way of engaging your followers. In a similar way, there's also Instagram Live, very similar to the Facebook Live. It's a feature on the stories section of Instagram where you can stream a video again in the same way and engage with your followers in real time. Now, for examples of what you could do in that live video, you could do little news announcements about what your charity is doing, a Q&A session with your supporters. You can talk about your fundraising project and your match funding and the people that you're benefiting, or you can actually use it to film a bit of a fundraising event to show what people are up to. So all this stuff is very interesting for your supporters. Now, again, same way as Facebook, if you're planning a session, promote it to your followers in advance, tell them to come and join you on a certain date. And once you start broadcasting that video, your followers will see a little circle going around your profile picture on their page, so that alerts them that you're now live. So 2 very useful tools to really get people coming in and engaging with you and bringing in that human element to your fundraising. Now, just before I hand over to Chris, just separately, we're at the end of the slides now on the webinar, but we've added this resources slide at the end, and this contains a link to everything we've mentioned through the whole webinar today. So we'll make these slides available at the end. We'll be sending them out to you, and you can use these links to have a look around, a bit more about Trust Top Up, a bit more about major grants, and enhancing your fundraising and your maximising your match funding. So do use that if you can. Thank you. I'll just hand over to Chris again now.
Thank you, Misha. Thank you, Helen, as well. Thank you, an excellent section. And thank you for that resources slide. So as you say, that will be circulated and very useful indeed. So we are just running slightly over time. I'm just quickly looking at the questions. We've actually answered during the seminar 24 questions, actually. They will be shared with everybody as part of what we circulate after the event as well. So we'll see the questions that were asked and the answers given by members of the team. But we made that decision because it became clear about 15 minutes ago we were going to run out of time if we tried to leave everything to the end. To wrap up, really, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of the speakers, all the home team speakers, but particularly our guest speakers this morning, Caroline, Herman and Paul Monger, for an excellent insight, respectively, into major grant funding and also Trust Top Up as well. Some useful tips there, I'm sure, for everybody. Before we say goodbye, then please don't forget we've got Double Match Day coming up this Friday and Saturday. So it's running over that sort of 2-day period, really, to give people a sort of weekend of a Saturday of activities as well. So as the clock ticks over from midnight on Thursday evening to Friday, then Double Match Day begins. So please do engage with that and see what's going on the Good Exchange and in social media as well. We're looking forward to that, and we've had some very successful ones in recent months. So again, thank you very much for listening into this morning. It's been excellent, I believe, certainly in terms of covering the whole subject of match funding and how that's maximised, really brought to life, I feel, by our guest speakers. So thank you again to Paul and Caroline. And thank you, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now. Enjoy the hot weather while it lasts.